here we
Okay,
are.
Amy, actually, I really want to talk about this a little bit because I think it's so important because I feel like people need things to line up before they take that big leap. And we have a similar story with that. I took a semester of school too, where it's like everyone keeps waiting for the sponsorships to come and then they'll give it 100%, or they keep waiting to like line themselves better. First, I'm going to get better, and when I have a shot, that's when I'll give it the shot. But doing other things like, I'm not saying like there's a right or a wrong decision, but like make a decision of what you want to do. And it's scary because you're going to end up with no excuses. Like if you take that time off of school, I did the same thing in 2014. Like if you come up short, if you don't end up best in the world, you don't have that to fall back on. It can't be like, oh, you know what? I was also coaching and in school. You know,
Exactly. You don't
you
have
gave
that
everything that you have, and you still might come up short. And that's scary to do, but that's the only, you have to be willing to risk that failure, whatever you want to call it. But I think that's the only way you can kind of charge forward and give yourself a legitimate shot of being the best. That's also crazy to me. Like, we can actually say we want to be the best in the world at something. That's like insane. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, but I couldn't agree more. Like having that in the back of your mind that you have an excuse to fall back on, it's the same as just getting sick before a competition or feeling something is aching. Like I've never said it before I compete out loud or anything. And I usually don't tell people afterwards unless it's like way after, because it's not an excuse that you want to have in the back of your mind. Then you have something to fall back on because it might not affect it at all. You haven't been sick 2 weeks before or a week before. Like once you're there, your body is going to know when to be ready. And yes, it might hit you, but it might also not. But having that excuse in the back of your mind also, like,
it gives you an easy
so
way out.
tight, it gives you a reason when it hurts the most to actually back off. And I think
like it's okay, like your body's hurting. And I've noticed, like we both do this in training, like we don't show up. I might be sore, I might have not slept, like you might have been doing something with your shoulder, I don't even know what's going on, but like we don't do that to each other. It would be so easy for us to like, I'd say to you like oh, my back's really been aching this week, I'm just gonna go lighter, and I'm kind of letting you win with an excuse. We don't do that, whether it's in training, whether it's a game, it's something you have to train to. Like, don't let it be an excuse. Like whatever you have going on, that's who you are today, and give 100% of that.
And you need to be smart, obviously, but yes, it's important.
Yeah. I wasn't saying train for injuries. I'm trying to get to the point of you don't use it as an excuse. But you're right. Yeah, be smart.
I'm very much into, I've learned you gotta listen to your body, but
I feel like I'm a couple years behind. I'm getting there too.
I look at it a little bit different, like training and competing. I'm like, competing, you just go. You're there to do your work and show all the hard work you've put in. All right, so I would really like to know, like, I obviously knew you when you started, but I don't think I've ever heard like the real story, how it was for you when you competed at the games for the first time. Like how did that come about, and how was your experience?
Yeah. Like, long story short, it's so crazy because I talk so much about how much I love competing, which I truly do. But my first experience at the games was not a great one. I didn't like it. So if you go back to like, I started in 2011 when I saw you in the CrossFit Games. And I was like, wow, like that's what I want to do. Like I want to be at the games. And I start CrossFit and things came kind of easy to me. Like I was good right away, which honestly I think is like not a good thing because then things come easily and it can be harder to attack challenges. But I'd probably only been doing CrossFit for I'd been doing it for a couple of weeks where I was like, I'm going to make regionals. I remember telling my mom, like, I want to make regionals. And she was like, okay. So I had that in the back of my mind. And then it was probably around that New Year mark where I remembered saying to myself, you know what? I want to make the CrossFit Games this year. And I've always had this insane drive, just similar to you. I just love competition. I just love getting better. I'd show up to boot camp classes, CrossFit classes. You'd always have like those people that you would compete with. And around that time that I decided that I wanted to make the CrossFit Games, I remember one of my little cousins had like a bright yellow bracelet. And I remember just picking it up, and I was like, can I keep this? And he was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, I put it on, and it was like bright yellow. And I remember I put it on, and I was like, this is my reminder that I'm going to make it to the CrossFit Games. And I didn't take it off. I didn't take it off when we had a gala at school. I'd be wearing this like sparkly black dress. I had my hair curled. I'd be wearing heels and a bright yellow gummy bracelet. It was ridiculous. But that was my thing. I was going to make it to the CrossFit Games. And it pushed me so hard. Because I remember I'd be like hanging, like we'd be in boot camp class, and I'd be like holding a plank, and the coach would be bringing extra sandbags to put on my back. And I'd be like, I was be looking at it, I'd be like, I'm going to make like, I can push, I want to make the games. Or I'd be like doing like run intervals after training. And it was like, every time my hand would pop up, I'd see the yellow. I was like, that's my cue to push. So whenever it got hard, I was like, I'm going to make it to the CrossFit Games.
It's like, it makes you put that extra. The extra.
It's my reminder. And still to this day, I use bracelets. It might be for different reasons, not to make the CrossFit Games, but it's, to me, it's a reminder for something. And like, I literally, like, I've seen, like, we have some bracelets, and it's like, I encourage people to do that, to have a visual reminder of like, when things get tough, like, why are you doing this? And your bracelet is your why. And I ended up going to regionals that year, and that was probably the first time that I like truly fell in love with competing. Like, I never loved competing in gymnastics. I like that floor was magical. Like,
it was also one of my favorite regionals ever.
It was an awesome
regionals is incredible.
Yeah. I miss regionals a lot. I try and pick like sanctionals, like which ones are going to be like a regional, you know. But okay, so that year at regionals, that was like, I'd enter the floor and just like like the crowd goes roaring. I was like so nervous before, but once it's like 3, 2, 1, go, like, you know exactly what you're doing. And like, I looked so much up to you, and I was like competing against you. And it was like, I think there were 6 events, and in 5 out of the 6, you took first, but I took second. And it was like, so I felt like I was competing against you.
Yeah.
And I think I, like, in hindsight, I had this false perception of like that I was there with you. I was at your level because I was taking second, but there just was no one to inch in between us. So I come out of this with this, like, I make my first CrossFit Games, and I don't think anyone will ever forget, like, it'll probably like make me I was so like, that was, I
get like goosebumps. It's like that.
It's like your goal, and you made it, and we worked so hard for that. But I think I had this like false perception of where I was, because now I was excited for the games, and I wanted to compete again. Like, I wanted to be in the competition. But like, the truth of I trained, but the truth of it was that I'd never really trained in the sport. I'd never really trained the volume of it, or like the running of the games. And at that
time, we weren't training together. We were at separate gyms.
No. Yeah. We were. You had moved to CrossFit
like one session where you came to CrossFit Reykjavik and trained with me a little bit. But yeah.
So it's like that summer, I don't think I knew what to expect. I had never trained my mind. I was very much like, when I visualize things going perfect. So of course at the games I don't do that, and I'm like, what's happening? I was very focused on results and what place I was taking. Yeah. And then, so when I'm like, and I'm slipping down the leaderboard, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening? And I can't be calm and give every workout I keep having to like make up for my last one, where you can only ever do your best, and making up for something else, you're just going to go out too hot. You're going to mess something else up. And I remember getting to the games, and I was so suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, like I had struggled so much with muscle ups that year. Like, it was so hard. That was like the same. It was like my first thing that I intervened that I physically could not do. So I'd watched Cami on videos like again and again, and like see who's the best at muscle ups. So I just like watched hours of her on YouTube, and suddenly she's there, and you're like, oh my gosh, like that's Cami. And the same with like, so it was like that factor of it. Yeah. Like getting intimidated by my competitors, it felt like everyone else knew each other, and I felt like I was alone. Like, I didn't have a coach. Like, when things are going wrong, there was no one to, like, literally, like, this is what's happening, this is what I need you to focus on.
Yeah.
So it kind of, like, at the end of it all, like, I get cut. They made cuts that year. So the final day, I'm sitting in the stands, and I was, like, so disappointed. I was, like, very focused on, like, what place I was in. I was very focused on, like, that I didn't make the cut. I felt embarrassed. I didn't feel like I belonged there. Like, I did not have, like, a great experience at the CrossFit Games. So it's like,
it's very interesting because it's you got your goal, and I always say to everyone, like, have a goal every time you're competing. And we've talked about it many times, like, you can't be too oriented on where you place. You need to have a goal that fits for yourself, but you have to go in with the goal. I think it's odd when people go in and it's like, oh, I'm just here to compete and have fun. It's like, well, if you're a competitor, you're here to compete and have fun, but you're here to show up and you're here to bring in.
yeah.
But it's really hard when you don't know exactly what to expect, where you know where you stand, because, like you said, we have been training together, like, not training together, we competed against each other, and then you're getting second place in all these events, and I had the title fittest woman in the world then, and I ended up winning the games 2012 as well. So, like, you were right behind me, and then obviously you don't know exactly what to expect at the CrossFit Games. And that is one of the things that I've thought when I see, especially a lot of the rookies that come to the games, is like, all right, what you have is you don't have the pressure of performance that everyone else might have and have put on themselves. So that's something that you can gain from this. But another thing that might be intimidating is that you've also never done this before. You don't know exactly
what
to
the
expect.
experience.
You watched it, but you don't know what to expect. And maybe, especially now, like, you've seen these athletes on TV multiple years, and maybe someone that you look up to and all of that, and then all of a sudden you're competing alongside them and against them, and you can never have that doubt in your mind that you can't beat them.
That
Like,
you don't
you have
belong.
to have that you belong. You earned your place. You're supposed to be here. You're supposed to be next to me and doing this. You can't have unrealistic expectations on yourself, because then you're always going to be disappointed. So I think you, through that year, you probably could have really enjoyed being at the CrossFit Games and been proud of what you did, still ending up in that same spot. But because
if I had realistic expectations going into it, and if I had goals that were achievable, no matter, like, results are in my control. I don't know what you are going to do or any of the other 39 girls. So it's like, but having expectations of, like, all right, how am I going to perform? How am I going to act? What is my mindset going to be? Like, those are things that you can really, like, hone in on, which are ultimately going to get you better results, but you can't be focusing on that. Yeah, that was the story of my first one. I don't think I truly enjoyed competing at the CrossFit Games until 2015, after I had not made the games, after I started working with Ben, who is now my coach, and it was literally working with him throughout the whole year before the 2015 games. It was the first time I think I needed, and that's another one that I think we really need to talk about, is failures. And I want to say failures because I think they're only failures if you view it as a destination and you stop trying. Like, if I didn't make the games in 2014, I could have seen that as a failure. I could have seen myself as a failure and that I didn't belong. Or you can say, all right, I failed at this particular event and I didn't make the games. Nothing more. It doesn't define me. It doesn't mean that I'm worse than anyone else. It doesn't mean that I don't belong there. I just need to pick myself up, learn from it, and keep going. And I used that as motivation. And I started reading sports psychology. I started working with Ben. Like, he started working on my mind. And it was like, suddenly coming into 2015, it was like, it was a
you really changed.
I really did.